we got to see a rare inside glimpse at how the sausage is made in Washington, and some of, I'm not saying that it's all that productive. I'm just saying that it is interesting to see sort of the real relationship between the president and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. This meeting that happened yesterday, Trump gets into it with them, and they were meeting about the budget and talking about the wall. And so there's a myriad of things that we can sort of take away from this. And I really want to sort of dig into this when we can. So we'll go ahead and just go into the clips. We won't look at all of it, but we're going to look at a pretty sizable chunk of it today. So this is Nancy Pelosi, Donald Trump, and Chuck Schumer all meeting in the Oval Office.
So the wall will get built, but we may not have an agreement today. We probably won't. But we have an agreement on other things that are really good. Nancy, would you like to say something?
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity to meet with you so that we can work together in a bipartisan way to meet the needs of the American people. I think the American people recognize that we must keep government open, that a shutdown is not worth anything, and that you should not have a Trump shutdown. You have the White House,
did you say Trump?
shutdown.
Oh.
You have the White House.
gonna go on.
You have the Senate. You have the House of Representatives. You have the votes. You should pass it
No, we
right
don't have
now.
the votes, Nancy, because in the Senate, we need 60 votes.
No, but in the House.
And we don't
You
have.
could bring it up right now.
Yeah, but I
today.
can't, excuse me, but I can't get it passed in the House if it's not going to pass in the Senate. I don't want to waste time.
Well, the fact is, you can get it started that way.
The
And-
House, we can get passed very easily.
Okay,
and we
then do
do.
it. Then
But
do
the
it.
problem is the Senate, because we need 10 Democrats to vote,
No,
and
no, that's
they
not
won't
the
vote.
point, Mr. President. The point is that there are equities to be weighed, and we're here to have a conversation in a
Correct.
prayerful way, so I don't think we should have a debate in front of the press on this. But the fact is, the House Republicans could bring up this bill, if they had the votes, immediately, and set the tone for what you want.
If we thought we were going to get it passed in the Senate, Nancy, we would do it immediately. We'd get it passed very easily in the House.
No, that's
We
not
would
the
get
point.
it, Nancy, I'd have it passed in 2 seconds. It doesn't matter, though, because we can't get it passed in the Senate because we need 10 Democrat votes.
Well,
That's the problem.
again, let us have our conversation, then we
That's
can
right.
meet with the press again. But the fact is that legislating, which is what we do.
Right.
You begin, you make your point, you state your case. That's what the House Republicans could do, if they had the votes. But there are no votes in the House, a majority of votes, for a wall, no matter where you start.
Exactly right. You don't have
If I needed the votes for the wall in the House, I would have them in one session,
Well, then
would
go
be
do it.
done.
Go do it.
It doesn't help because we need 10 Democrats in
No,
the
don't put
Senate.
it on the Senate, put
course.
it on the negotiation.
Okay, let me ask.
All right, so first of all, why is it that Pelosi is so terrified about having this conversation in public? Think about that, because you heard her twice in that clip say, well, let's not talk about this in front of the press. Let's not talk about this in front of everybody. Why? I love this, frankly. I mean, I'm ecstatic that this is going on. And not just because I'm a information and political junkie, because of course I am, but also because I don't like this idea of a bunch of backroom deals that happen in meetings that there's no records of, and this is how the negotiation takes place. I want this. I want to see the debate. I want to see elected officials getting together, having meetings, discussing the issues, and explaining why they believe what they believe, and then having the other side explain why they believe that their policy is best. I want that. That's transparency. I mean, sure, it may bore some people to tears, and I get that. And there may be people that are upset by it, and I get that. But if we're talking about what's good for the country, I think it benefits the country when we have elected officials from different sides of the aisle that disagree with one another, getting together and actually discussing the issue in depth and explaining why they stand where they do. Now, that being said, I'm about to say something that I know is going to surprise an awful lot of people. I agree with Nancy Pelosi. I know the screams of despair and woe and the weeping and gnashing of teeth are just deafening. Now, I'm not saying I agree with Nancy Pelosi's policy on the border. I'm saying I agree with her characterization of what just happened there, because you heard her and Trump going back and forth. and her saying, it doesn't matter how you slice it, you do not have the votes in the House. And Trump saying, no, we could get it passed in 2 seconds. It would be easy. It wouldn't be a problem. Sorry. The truth is, I think Nancy Pelosi is probably right. And the reason that I say that is because there are just as many Republicans, seemingly, that want an open border as Democrats. And you can tell that based on their actions. Nancy Pelosi makes actually a very solid point here. She says, Mr. President, you've had the House, you've had the Senate, you've had the White House for 2 years. Why is this coming up now? That's a good point. And when it comes to this, there are a lot of Republicans in both the House and the Senate that, because they work at the behest of the chamber of crony capitalism, as the great one Mark Levin, who's on this fine station, loves to call it, because of that, because they're worried about the cheap labor coming in, that they're really not all that keen on stopping the influx and the flow of illegal immigration. They're just not that interested in it. This is not a thing that's going to affect them because they live in a gated community, and they live in a place, most of them, far away from the border and its problems. And because of that, frankly, it doesn't really rock their wagon, so they're not all that concerned with it. They really don't care. Most of them, not all of them. The Freedom Caucus has actually been very, very difficult on this. When the Democrats have tried to do something with it, the Freedom Caucus has been the ones that stepped in and said, no, we believe in border security. We believe in building a wall. We are making our stand here. And I applaud them for that. God bless the Freedom Caucus for actually standing up and saying, we're not just going to continue to pass these endless budgets that continue to raise money and raise our cost and raise our debt and everything else over and over and over again, unless we're at least getting something that we want. And I do thank the Freedom Caucus for saying that, but Nancy Pelosi is right. She gives 2 pieces of advice there that I think actually were solid and the president should listen to her on, which I know sounds weird coming out of my mouth, but it's the truth. First of all, she's right that he does not have the votes in the House. And second of all, if he has the votes in the House, theoretically, whether he does or not, and she, of course, asserts that he doesn't, which unfortunately is an assessment I tend to agree with, let's just say for the sake of argument that he did have the votes in the House. Why not pass it, send it to the Senate, and make them vote on it? I'm serious. Let's see who the weasels are. Now, it will fail. Trump is right on that. There is no way that there are going to be, you're going to get 10 Democrat senators to vote in favor of it. But you know what? I'd be far more curious to do it as an exploration. In other words, I want to use it as a litmus test to find out who really cares about border security and who really doesn't care. And I'll be honest with you, there's quite a few senators, not only Doug Jones, but maybe even Richard Shelby, who probably, I don't know, it would depend on, we'd have to see how it goes, and that's the reason I'm in favor of taking the vote in the first place. There's going to be quite a few Republicans that vote against that measure. And because of that, and because I understand that, that's really why I want to see this play out. Because then we would find out once and for all who really cares about border security and who doesn't. Now, will that translate into people and incumbents being overthrown? Honestly, I highly doubt it. People just don't pay that much attention to their representatives' voting record. If that were the case, Martha Roby would have been kicked out a long time ago. And so, because of that, all I'm saying here is that at the very least, then the Senate has to answer for it. Hold their feet to the fire. Make them say to the American people, yeah, we know you want the border wall. We know you want a secure border, but we're not going to give it to you anyway. Make them say that and have to make that case to the American people. That is a good thing to do. And so on both counts here, I think Nancy Pelosi actually happens to be right on this. So weird as that is to say, right now, she's doing pretty well. Let's go ahead and go to the next clip.
Disagreement about the wall,
Washington
whether
Post.
it's effective or whatever, not on border security, but on the wall. We do not want to shut down the government. You have called 20 times to shut down the government. You say, I want to shut down the government. We don't. We want to come to an agreement. If we can't come to an agreement, we have solutions that will pass the House and Senate right now and will not shut down the government, and that's what we're urging you to do. Not threaten to shut down the government,
You don't
because you,
wanna
let me
shut
just
down the
finish,
government,
because
Chuck.
you can't get
The
your
last
way.
time you shut it down, you
Yeah,
got
let me
killed.
say something, Mr. President. You just say my way or we'll shut down the government. We have a proposal that Democrats and Republicans will support to do a CR that will not shut down the government. We urge you to take
And
it.
if it's not good border security, I
It
won't
is
take
very
it.
good border
And if it's not
security.
good border security, I won't take it.
It's what the
Because
board.
when you look at these numbers of the effectiveness of our border security, and when you look at the job that we're doing
You
with our
just said
military,
it is effective.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah, you just said it's
Without
effective.
a wall, these are only areas where you have the walls.
We wanna do
Where
this-
you have walls, Chuck, it's effective. Where you don't have walls, it is not effective.
All right, so a couple of things there. First of all, statistics are in. Areas that happen to have a wall have less crime, have less drugs being imported across the border. And so when you're looking at the raw numbers, Trump is actually right on that. Where you have a wall is more effective. But I want to get sort of to the meta message, as it were, here. I want to go a little bit deeper into what they're actually saying, because I think Trump actually, again, from a border security standpoint, I actually side with Trump a lot when it comes to that issue. But one thing I do want to point out about Chuck, it takes two sides to shut down the government. And what you always see, and you saw it on full display there, both from Trump and from Schumer, is that when the government shuts down, everybody starts trying to play the blame game. Everybody starts trying to say, well, they're the reason it shut down. No, they're the reason it shut down. It takes both sides to do so unless you have some kind of supermajority in the Senate. And so what Trump said was, and this is a good thing, he gave a very clear, concise picture of what he wants. Now, he may not get it, but the point is, you know where the man stands. He's saying, we need to fund the border wall. That's a part of border security. And because of that, if I don't get a bill that includes that, I will not sign it. That's fine. Those are his terms. And he is the president of the United States. He is duly elected by the people through the Electoral College. He has every right to say that if he wants to. He can say, even though it wouldn't be politically advisable, he could say, Chuck, I'm not going to sign it because you pass it and I hate your stupid face. Like, as dumb as that would be to say, it just goes to show you, and I'm using that as an example, that the president he's not under some kind of obligation to sign whatever happens to show up on his desk. That is his prerogative. That's why he's president. And the same could be said for the House, and the same could be said for the Senate. When it comes to them passing bills, they are under no obligation whatsoever to just pass a bill for the sake of passing a bill. And Trump is not under that obligation either. And so he very clearly and distinctly determines what the negotiating terms are going to be. Now, Trump may change his mind later because they offer him something else. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But the point is, it is not a bad thing for either side, regardless of who it is. I would be saying this if it were Barack Obama. Barack Obama, if there's something specifically he wanted, and he's saying that this is it. Now, he is effectively shutting down the government because of that, but it still takes two sides to shut it down. The shutdown that happened under Barack Obama that was led largely by Senator Ted Cruz, who you guys all know I'm a big fan of. Ted Cruz had a role in shutting down the government, but so did Barack Obama, because he was the president and he was the one that was saying, I'm not going to sign it if this takes place. And the Senate Democrats were saying, we're not going to get on board unless we get this list of things that we want. And it was largely that we want to fund the things that we want to fund. And so that being said, whether it's Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, when a government shutdown takes place, what you are dealing with is both sides saying we want something and we're not going to pass it until we get it. So Chuck Schumer can waggle his finger and virtue signal at Trump all that he wants, but at the end of the day, he's just as responsible for allowing the government to shut down as Trump is. All Chuck Schumer would have to say is, okay, Mr. President, we'll take that under advisement. And we'll try to do something about funding the border wall. We may not be able to give you exactly the amount that you're wanting, but we can give you this. And by the way, $5 billion is not too much to ask for. In fact, I was doing a little research this morning. Do you know that annually, every single year, even if you're counting for the taxes that they do contribute, illegal immigrants cost American taxpayers roughly, if you're combining state and local and federal government taxes, costs them about $116 billion a year. Which means that even if we didn't even necessarily stop all immigration, but greatly halted it and started deporting people that are taking advantage of our welfare state, we could theoretically make our money back, just in a few years. If we were spending 20, maybe $30 billion on a wall, that's the highest estimation that I've seen on how much it would take to complete the border wall would be about 30 billion. Well, that's a drop in the bucket. Now, I get that not everybody that is partaking of that is magically going to disappear the second the wall is erected. But what I'm saying is they act as though this is a insane, ridiculous amount of money to ask to help increase our border security and help build the wall. But if the border keeps out even a large plurality of people coming into the country, even if it's not 100% effective, and it's not going to be 100% effective. Nobody with a brain thinks that it's going to automatically stop every single problem that we have. But if it greatly decreases illegal immigration, then we're actually going to wind up saving money with just in a few years. All we have to do is in 5 years, we'll make our money back easily. Frankly, 5 years is probably too long. But if we do that and we couple that with deporting people that aren't already here, and see, the advantage to that is going to be that it will be less likely, because we hear all the time that they caught somebody and, well, this person's been deported 4 times. And I'm like, well, obviously the border security is not that great if they're able to get in 4 separate times. And so we'll have a lot of those people that we deport now mean a lot more because they're not as able to easily sneak across the border again. And so that makes our deportations less common, and that also means that we're going to spend less money and less resources deporting people. And so if you're looking at it from the numbers, and you guys know I'm a stats guy, I'm a numbers guy, we actually come out on top monetarily. Just within a few years, we'll make our money back. And so this is a very worthwhile endeavor. Think about if Ronald Reagan had actually been able to build the wall when he originally proposed it back in the 1980s. Think about how much money we would have saved since then if we had just done some regular maintenance and upkeep. You're looking at that. And if he had actually gotten that in exchange for amnesty like he originally said that he wanted to do, well, we would have far less problems with immigration. Now, I'm not saying it wouldn't be an issue. Probably always will be. But the point is, it would not be nearly the issue that it is today. And so we would have had 30 years worth of the wall. And so it makes sense to build it now and build it quickly. So that being said, let's go ahead and look at another clip from this same meeting.
Yeah.
Let's call a halt to this. We've come in here as the first branch of government, Article 1, the legislative branch. We're coming in good faith to negotiate with you about how we.
Oh, look at Nancy all of a sudden caring about the Constitution.
We're going to keep it open if we have border security. If we don't have border security, Chuck,
I'm with you.
we're not going to keep it open.
I'm with you. We are going to have border security.
And it's the same border. You're bragging about what has been done.
By us.
We want to do the same thing we did last year, this year. That's our proposal. If it's good then, it's good now, and it won't shut down the government.
Chuck, we can build a
But that's
much
it.
bigger
Let's
section with
debate.
more money.
Let's debate in private.
Okay.
Okay? Yeah. Let's debate in
That
private.
is devoid, frankly, of fact, and we can.
We need
dispel
border
that.
security, and I think we all agree that we need border security.
Yes,
Is that
we
right?
do.
Good.
We do.
See? We get along. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so a little humor from Donald Trump there, and it was amusing, but here's the thing, and I want you to pay close attention to this. Why is it that both Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi keep saying, well, let's not talk about this in public. Let's not talk about this in public. Let's talk about this privately. Because right now, they're on Trump's home turf, and they know that. They're in the Oval Office with the President of the United States. And the truth is, he's making them look bad, because he is exposing the fact that they really don't care about the border and don't want to increase border security. He is exposing that this is not something that is of great concern to them, and they know that on that issue they are grossly out of step with the American people. And because of that, and because they understand that from a political perspective, he's making them look pretty foolish, that's why they want to have this conversation in private. They don't want to have this debate in public. Because as long as it's happening in a back room, well, then all of a sudden the story doesn't become what you're seeing right in front of your eyes. It doesn't become what the American people are watching on live TV. It becomes whatever the Washington Post says that conversation was like. It becomes whatever the New York Times says that conversation was like. You see, when you're dealing with a White House correspondent or some political pundit that's working in a back room and talking to people and getting that information through another source who's getting it through another source, well, by the time it goes through about 3 or 4 people, and it also has had the unfortunate side effect of being sanitized and whitewashed by somebody that has a very clear liberal-leaning bias, like the New York Times, like the Washington Post, like The Hill, well, then what you're eventually going to wind up getting is a controlled message that favors the Democrats. See, this is why I think Trump really wants to have this conversation out in the open in front of everybody. Because then they get to see how the conversation actually goes, as opposed to the way that the Washington Post is telling you that it's going. And I use the Washington Post and The Hill and other more liberal-leaning sources all the time. You guys know that. I'm not saying that they're completely or wholly unreliable, but there is a pretty prevalent media bias. And you'll notice, too, another thing that they keep doing is that, have you noticed in this clip that you'll have Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi regularly turning to the cameras? So they'll be engaged in a conversation with Trump like this, and then all of a sudden when they're about to make a big point, they turn to the camera. The reason they're doing that is because they know they're playing to their buddies in the media. Because they're trying to get that soundbite form, and that's why Chuck Schumer, he's not interested in having a conversation with the president. And like Nancy Pelosi said in that last clip, they're not operating in good faith. They have no intention of walking out of the White House that day. They had no intention of walking out of the White House with any kind of funding for the border wall. And so Chuck Schumer can say, well, it's just your way or no way. Well, isn't that exactly what you're asking for too? What Chuck Schumer was asking for in that last thing was the status quo. And we're going to see a clip of that here in a second as well. And while I do think that it was amusing that Nancy Pelosi was suddenly so concerned with the Constitution, what Schumer is asking for is the status quo, which is everything that he wants. Trump is on pace right now to double the debt that was added by Barack Obama. Think about that. And it's because, and Trump is partially responsible for this. I'm not trying to take the responsibility off of him. He signed those continuing resolutions into law, just like the Senate and House passed them. But what Schumer is proposing is, let's keep doing what we've always been doing. If it's good then, it's good now. And you know what? He's making a good point. The problem is, it wasn't good then, and it's not good now. The problem is, the president should have never signed that omnibus bill into into law. He should have never passed that thing. He should have never signed it. I said that. You can go back and listen to the show. I said that back when it was happening. He should have never signed it into law. And when the president said, well, I've got to fund the military, and so because of that, I'm going to go ahead and fund it, the president should have said, no. Send me a separate spending bill for the military if you want to, but I'm not going to sign all this ridiculous level of spending into effect. I'm not going to do it, especially when I'm not getting anything out of it. I'm not getting any of the things that was promised that the American people clearly want. I'm especially not going to sign it into law when that is not happening. And so what we're seeing here, what we're looking at, is really a fight that should have happened 2 years ago. We're seeing a fight that should have happened 2 years ago. And the fact that we're doing it in the 9th hour, that we're doing it when it's Nancy Pelosi is about to become Speaker of the House and the Democrats will take control of the House. The idea that we're doing this now, it's too little too late. I mean, goodness knows, I want the border wall funded. I want Trump to be able to build the border wall. I am 100% behind him on that. But he waited too late. He should have done this when he came in, not now. It is not doing anybody any good now, 2 years after the fact, after this fight really should have happened, to try to do it now, because now he only has a little less than a month left before he has to deal with a Democrat House. And do you really think the Democrats are going to put forward a budget Well, first of all, they're not going to put forward a budget anyway. But do you really think they're going to put forward a budget that includes increased spending for border security to keep potential Democrat voters out? Because that's what this is all about in the end. This is about importing people that tend to vote Democrat. And that's why the Democrats are not in favor of border security. You had Beto O'Rourke, who's the new darling of the left, who people are talking about him running in 2020. And there seems to be a decent amount of enthusiasm for him amongst the Democrats. You're now talking about somebody who actually went forward and funded the migrant caravan. These are not people that are in favor of a secure border and the rule of law. They just simply are not, and their actions show that. And so this deal, it was bad then, and it is bad now. And Chuck Schumer, though this wasn't his intention, has just perfectly illustrated why the Republicans should not have gone along to get along and continued to pass along the status quo and done exactly what Democrats wanted, because this is the irony of this. The status quo is what Democrats want. That is their intended goal. And so by Chuck Schumer saying, well, you just want your one, or saying we're going to shut down the government. Well, you're saying the exact same thing. You're saying, unless you give me all the spending that I want, unless you give me exactly what we got last time, and I get everything that I want, then I'm not going to have my people vote in favor of it. Well, then, in that case, you're effectively saying, unless I get everything I want, then I'm shutting the government down. He's being critical of Trump for doing exactly the same thing he just said that he would do. Next clip.
One thing I think we can agree on is we shouldn't shut down the government over a dispute, and you want to shut it down. You keep talking about
it. The last time, Chuck, you shut it
No,
down.
no, no.
And then you opened it up very quickly. And
20 times.
I don't want to do what you did.
20 times
Chuck,
you have called for, I will shut down the government if I don't get my will. None of us have said.
You want to know something?
You've said it.
Okay, you want to put that on
You've
my...
said it.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And
We
I am
disagree.
proud, and I'll
We
tell you
disagree.
what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle
Good.
of shutting down.
That is
And I'm going to
lucky.
shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you shouldn't shut
Okay.
it down.
Okay, so first of all, you may not be old enough to remember, because it was several months ago now, that Chuck Schumer was basically admitting to shutting the government down just a few months ago when it was an issue of getting what he wanted in the spending bill for the continuing resolution. You'll remember that when it came to things like funding Obamacare, that it was Chuck Schumer that said, I'm going to shut the government down. And yet now he's saying he didn't do that. But nonetheless, again, like I said, it takes both branches of it takes both sides of the aisle to shut down government. It just does. Every single time. It wasn't different then. It's not different now. The issue over which it is being shut down may be different. But I love that what Trump was saying. This is absolutely Trump at his best. And goodness knows I have my disagreements with the man. But this is exactly why people wanted Donald Trump in the White House. Because he will look these people in the eye and say, you know what, screw you. I don't really care if you're going to blame me for it or not. Because if it means me getting to be able to increase the security at our border or the government shutting down, I'm picking the border. And you know what? The vast majority of Americans would do the same thing. And so Trump finally gets frustrated to the point where he's saying, I'm tired of the rigmarole. I'm tired of playing your political games. I'm tired of trying to defend myself against the blame game, saying that you're the one that wants to shut the government down. When he's the one, again, Trump's to blame in this too, but he's also the one that's saying, if I don't get everything I want, then I'm not going to fund the government either. And so Trump says, you know what? That's fine. I'll take the blame for it. And I'm proud to do so, because the border is something that is worth taking a stand on. So bravo, Trump. That is exactly why people voted for him. That's why people like him, because he stands up to these people and calls them out on their crap. And he did a great job there. That was the perfect way to handle it. I am so tired of milquetoast, mild-mannered Republicans that are afraid of their own shadow that don't want to ever be blamed for shutting down the government or doing anything controversial. They're so worried about their job and getting reelected that they'll never take ownership of anything. And Trump says, you know what? I'll own that. That's fine. This issue is worth doing that over. And he's exactly right. And I am glad that he is willing to say that. I'm glad that he's willing to say, I don't care if we shut the government down. I'll take the blame for it. That's fine. As long as it is for a good cause, and I think that this is a good cause, then I'll happily bear the blame for that. And I think Americans, the vast majority of them, are going to stand with him on that. I really do. I hope it doesn't come to a shutdown. And like Trump said in that last clip, that's not what I want. That's not my goal. What I want is border security, and I'm willing to fund the government as long as I get that. But I want you to think about this too. How is it possible that we have not defunded Planned Parenthood yet? We have had 2 years of a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican president, and somehow we still have not defunded a dime of Planned Parenthood. Explain that one to me. Because the truth is, when it comes to these issues, the issues that are most important to their base, the Republicans are nowhere to be found. That is $500 million. You want to start funding the border wall? That'd be one place to start getting the money. Take $500 million out of that we're giving to Planned Parenthood. Let's reallocate that towards the border wall. I'm fine with that. That's at least something that is constitutionally recommended. Healthcare, even if you're taking out the abortion side of this, healthcare is nowhere guaranteed in the Constitution. Border security is. Article 4, Section 4, look it up. I've read it on this particular issue, I don't know how many times on this show. Look it up. And what's so sad about this is that I don't even know where to start on this. Schumer, he wants to make a deal, but isn't he the one that refused to make a deal when Trump was offering amnesty to 1.8 million people, which, by the way, was 3 times what it was when it was Barack Obama proposing the same thing with DACA? So this idea that they're operating in good faith, as Nancy Pelosi says, and that they were convinced that they were going to make a deal, don't give me that. You had the opportunity to make a deal. Trump offered, and I thought it was a dumb offer, and I criticized him for it when it happened because there's no way that we should be granting amnesty to 1.8 million people. But Trump made the offer of a deal in exchange for the border wall, and the Democrats spat in his face. So the idea that there was going to be a deal reached, or that they were going to be willing to budge on this, or they were going to be willing to fund the border wall if certain conditions were met, simply not true. They weren't operating in good faith. They wanted exactly what they wanted, and they were not going to take anything less. And they have proven that over and over again. Trump offered them way more than even Barack Obama did, and they still refused it. They hate the guy that much. And unfortunately, this is how it played out. Now, I do want to play this montage because it just shows the utter hypocrisy of the left. This is a montage of different prominent Democrats, including Chuck Schumer himself, talking about the border and border security, and a hat tip to Fox News for putting this one together.
I voted numerous times when I was a senator to spend money to build a barrier to try to prevent illegal immigrants from coming in. And I do think you have to control your borders.
Where it was necessary, we did support some fencing. Where it was necessary, we did add Border Patrol agents. We have done what by any fair estimate would have to conclude is a good job, quote, securing the border.
People who enter the United States without our permission are illegal aliens, and illegal aliens should not be treated the same as people who entered the U.S. legally. The American people will never accept immigration reform unless they truly believe that their government is committed to ending future illegal immigration. The President's decision to end DACA was heartless and it was brainless. If this order stands, Hundreds of thousands of families will be ripped apart. Tens of thousands of American businesses will lose hardworking employees.
Those who enter our country illegally and those who employ them disrespect the rule of law. And because we live in an age where terrorists are challenging our borders, we cannot allow people to pour into the U.S. undetected, undocumented, and unchecked. If there are disruptions in these countries, if there's conflict, if there's bad governance, if there's war, if there's poverty, in this new world that we live in, we can't isolate ourselves. We can't hide behind a wall.
So there you got it. Everyone from Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Chuck Schumer saying that border security is something that is important. It's something that the American people expect, and it is a good thing to do so. And you heard Chuck Schumer would be, just absolutely eviscerated by the social justice warriors today for even using the term illegal alien. And yet in 2009, he was saying not only are they illegal aliens if they come across illegally, but they should not be treated the same as somebody who went through the legal process. This used to not be a controversial issue. It wasn't. This used to not be a big deal. You had people like Barack Obama, like Hillary Clinton, voting to fund the border wall. This was a common occurrence. Now, it never actually got built, and it never actually got funded, but the point is, they were at least theoretically in favor of it, and said that they were in favor of it, and at the very least gave lip service to it. This used to not be a controversial issue. It only got really controversial really with the last president. The longer it went on with Barack Obama, the worse it got. And so, really, this used to be something that we all kind of pretty much agreed on. We didn't agree on how it was going to be done necessarily. Some people, but the wall itself was not controversial, and the idea that we need to secure our borders was not controversial. I think that there's always been an element of both parties that really secretly kind of wanted illegal immigrants to continue to pour across the border for various reasons and to further their goals. But by and large, they would never say that or admit to it because they knew that the American people were not with them on that. And you know what? They're still, by and large, not with them on that. The difference is it has become politically incorrect to talk about it that way, and because of that, the Democrats have done what they always do and sided with the social justice warriors on that. Unfortunately, siding with the most radical parts of their base. The only thing that changed in that is that Democrats saw an opportunity to breed more voters, and that's eventually what this is all about anyway. But the government has a duty specifically talked about securing the borders and protecting the states from invasion in Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution. They are supposed to secure that border. But both sides right now are far more worried about getting their own individual little pet projects done. And that's why nothing ever seems to actually progress or actually get done when it comes to the border.